Alright, this is one of the last things you're going to learn how to do in Illustrator. Live Trace is a really powerful tool. It's one of my favorite tools to use when I digitize designs that I've drawn. This project will also introduce you to Photoshop for the first time, or second time if you remember the posterization steps. But this will be a little bit more in depth, a little bit more Photoshop than the last project. We'll also kind of introduce you to kind of an actual client project. Sometimes clients make some really weird demands and kind of introduces you to that process. So it has some really strong ties to real world situations. So here's the original email I was sent. This is from a former student who took on a client project and wasn't doing too well with it, so he handed it off to me. And essentially, it was, an email with some attachments, and then I needed to clean up the attachments and make them into a nice presentable design. So here's the scan. The client had like a t-shirt sign up, and then the design was on the t-shirt sign up sheet, and it was this really, really tiny, like poorly made design. I don't know if they like cut and pasted it together or made it in like Microsoft Word or something, but it was so small and really, really kind of destroyed by the scanning process. So I was asked to clean it up. Essentially, what you're going to do is you're going to do the exact same thing I did. You're going to take the scan, you're going to clean it up in Photoshop a little bit, and then you're going to bring it into Illustrator, and you're going to make it even cleaner and sharper so that it can be increased in size, and you can add color to it easily using Live Trace. So I'm going to walk you through in this demonstration video how to do all this, and then there's also a written tutorial if you don't like the video. Hello, it's Mr. Turk. I'm going to walk you through how to use Live Trace for the Ducky project. First things first, you're going to want to download your scan, which in this case I've labeled it number 2 resource blown up Ducky scan. Once you download that from Drive, put it in a folder, and you're going to need a folder for this project since you're going to be handling at least 3 files. And in that folder you'll save your Photoshop files to there, and you'll save your Illustrator files to there. In big projects you might want to make separate folders for those files, or folders for each individual trace, depending on your preferences. Okay, and then you're going to switch to Photoshop, which if you don't remember how to open up Illustrator programs, again, hit the start button, go to all programs, and then under Adobe Design Standard CS6 for you guys, CS5 for me, Photoshop is at the bottom of the list. So you just want to open up Photoshop, and then you're going to open up your scan, your file. So I'm going to go File, Open, just locate the file, okay, and then click Open, and it should open. And I'm not going to quite go into all of the things I need to go into with you on Photoshop, but essentially Photoshop is going to have a lot of the same kind of hotkeys and quick things, that I can show you about it that are kind of like Illustrator. You have your Control Plus and your Control Minus that'll zoom in and out. Again, if you hold on the space bar, you can toggle when you're really zoomed in. You can toggle around your file with the space bar. And the first thing you're going to notice here is if we need this duck, there's an awful lot of extra information we don't need. So I'm actually the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to crop an image file. Okay, so to crop images, which is kind of one of the most common things you're going to do, you're going to go to the crop tool, which is 2 interlocking L-shaped black bars, and it's in your left hand here in the same kind of setup as Illustrator, your toolbox on the left hand side of your screen, and you're going to just click and drag here to isolate the duck. Okay, and then you're just going to commit the crop by clicking this check mark here, double clicking on your crop, or hitting enter. Crop is going to look a whole lot different in CS6. There's a couple of extra cool features in CS6. I believe there's a box up here that you can check or uncheck that says delete crop pixels. If you uncheck that, then you'll keep all of the pixels in your image, and that can be really handy in later projects. But for now, you can keep that box checked, and you can just commit your crop. Okay, and I'm gonna go through kind of the same steps I would go through in the tutorial, but a little bit differently. Okay, so now that our scan's isolated and cropped, we're gonna add an adjustment layer, and we're gonna start to clean up this image here. So zoom in all the way to your image file. Remember, if you're zoomed way out, if you just hit Control 0, you will zoom all the way into your file here. And first things first, before I do anything, I'm just gonna actually increase the image size before I add an adjustment layer. So image size, and then the main difference actually between Photoshop and Illustrator is that Illustrator deals with vectors that no matter what size they are, they're always going to be nice and crisp. For Photoshop, you deal with raster imagery or pixelated or pixel imagery. So right now this image is 300 some odd pixels by 300 some odd pixels, and it's about, you know, an inch in both directions with a very high resolution. So we can actually turn down the resolution, which will reduce the size of our image, but we're going to increase the image size. So we're not actually making the image smaller. And I can make it as large as I want. A couple hundred pixels or so, around 600, will be twice as large as our last image with fewer pixels per inch, which is okay. So I'm going to hit OK to confirm that. Now, it may not look it, but there's actually more space and pixels to work with here. It still looks a little bit grainy, but that's okay. We just needed a couple more pixels so that it didn't look too grainy. And I'm going to make an adjustment layer here. So there's one way you can do it. You can click on adjustments in the adjustments panel, and if you don't see the adjustments panel, go to Window and then click on adjustments, and then obviously on your layers palette here there's an adjustment button as well with some menu options that are the exact same adjustment options in the adjustment panel. I use both of these methods to create adjustment layers. The first method the first adjustment layer I'm going to use is called levels, and levels just shows you how many blacks, white, and gray pixels there are, or any color pixels, how those disperse. So I'm going to move my black cursor here to the left to where most of my dark blackish pixels are. I'm going to keep the white where it is, and I'm going to move the gray to the left here so that some of that stuff's a little bit lighter in the middle there. What that does is it just kind of removes some of this weird choppy stuff in the middle. And then I'm going to add a threshold layer as well. Okay, so we'll go back to the adjustments selections, and in the adjustment panel there's a big green back button in the lower left hand side, so you can just click that to get back to your options here, and the threshold option is at the bottom middle, and when you click that you're going to notice everything kind of goes wacky. Threshold simply compresses everything to pure black and pure white, which is ideal for illustrations. So I can move that slider kind of wherever I want. So first things first, you're going to notice is the adjustment layers sort of clean things up, but our Ducky looks a little weird still, and we're getting there. One thing you can do to help kind of clean them up is to blur them a little bit. Sometimes that helps crisp up certain features or flatten the amount of information you have, or soften features, and you'll notice here it's still kind of grainy, so I mean a blur might help. To do that, just double click on your background layer to make it a layer, click OK, and then go to filter and then convert for smart filters. What this does is it protects your image. If you actually do apply a filter to an image, you lose that image's original data, and we don't want to do that necessarily. just yet. This is an easy trick to do so that you don't actually you know, destroy any of your original information. Another easy trick to kind of save your original image is to take that image layer listing and drag it down to the new button in your layer panel and let go, and that'll make a copy. And you can just hide that copy and then sort of ignore it and use it as kind of a safe kind of retreat if you ever mess up your original image and run out of history. So now with our filter or image ready for smart filters, we can add a blur. And the one I'm going to use is a Gaussian blur. I don't know how to pronounce it. And I'm just going to, instead of turning it way up like that, I'm just going to turn it up just a little bit. And you can already see it's kind of smoothing out some of our lines here. You know, if I turn it way up, it'll really smooth it out. And then I'll just click OK. And you'll notice down here in our layer panel here that it's got this Gaussian blur applied to the bottom, so I can always double click that, open it up again, and reapply that however I want. And I can also go back and double click on my adjustment layers here and change where the threshold occurs. So now we're seeing a little bit more of the duck, and if we go to the levels one, we can really mess with it. And I kind of clean it up some more. Okay, so now this is kind of some heavy editing here, and the only reason we're doing this is because we want to be able to adjust those features at all times, and our image is so badly damaged. Remember, the original image itself, if I shut these layers off, looks like this, and that's just, we got to clean that up. That's just terrible looking. So right now we got it pure black and white, and we can start actually cleaning it up and painting it if we want. Okay, so normally you wouldn't have to do this on an illustration for very long, but for this one you're actually going to have to do an awful lot of work. So we've got the original kind of image going here, and we're going to start to like really clean it up with our paintbrush. So right above your blurred Ducky layer, you're just going to add a new layer. To create a new layer, just click on the create a new layer button right next to the garbage pail in the layers panel, and make sure that you paint on this layer. You will damage your original image if you paint on it, and it's already protected because it's a smart object, but let's say it wasn't and you start painting on it, then you kind of ruined your original data unless you have this file saved somewhere else. So make sure you save backups and or copy your files original appearance into a new layer, because you can lose data pretty quick when you don't protect it. So I'm going to switch to my brush tool now. Brush tool is and looks like a brush in the toolbox, and you know, you'd hit B on your keyboard to switch to it. It's the most commonly used tool in Photoshop next to probably the selection tools. It's certainly the #1 tool for conceptual artists. If you've ever seen speed painting, it's mostly what they're using is the brush tool, and it's got a ton of options and other things I'm not really going to get too far into. But for today, I'm going to show you the basics. We're going to paint with the default black and white. Of course, you can double click on your color to change it to anything you want. We've already got it a bunch of adjustment layers above us, so when we paint it's going to look a little weirder than normal. Your brush adjustments can be made up here, so you can make your brush larger by adjusting the size here, and you can make it, you know, softer or harder on around the edges depending on the hardness here. You'll notice there's some presets for the brushes in here. You can use these if you want, and you can use hotkeys as well. I like using hotkeys. So the right bracket key on your keyboard will make your brush larger, and the left bracket key, square bracket, by the way, square bracket key on your keyboard will make it smaller. Okay, so these are really handy for making your brush larger and smaller. If you hold down the shift key and hit the left and right bracket key, that will make it softer or harder. And sometimes you do need a little bit of softness. I'm going to keep mine semi-soft, so it's got about 75 hardness. And then the number keys affect the opacity. So 70% would be number 7, and 0 is 100%. You're not going to mess with opacity for this, and you're not going to mess with blending mode or any of the other brush features that are available right now. So just kind of save those for later. And then once you're ready and got your brush all ready to go and kind of get the feel for the hotkeys, you can start painting. And essentially what you're going to do is you're going to clean this duck up. You really got to get in there and get the original integrity of the duck to kind of come through, okay, without compromising kind of the main things that you can see. Like, we can see where his eyeball is, we can see where the head is. We don't want to change that too drastically, okay? I don't know if you remember the PowerPoint at all or looked at it closely, but in that email, when this job got handed off to me in real life, the student was just basically saying I kind of got into trouble because I was being too loose with the form. So you got to keep the original form as best you can. And I'm actually just painting in white right now, okay? So just white. But if I want to paint in black, I just got to hit the X key on my keyboard to switch between white and black quickly. Okay, and we're starting to see our ducky here. So X, switch to black. Okay. Paint in a little bit more of his forehead. And it looks like this brush size is doing it for me. So I'm not going to sit here and clean up all of this, but you kind of get the idea. Switch between black and white real quick using the X key. Use your bracket keys to change your brush size. And just sort of clean this up. It doesn't have to be perfect because, of course, we're going to go to Illustrator in a couple minutes here. And in Illustrator, I'm going to show you a really, really awesome tool. But what I would do is make sure you clean up all this muck in here. Clean up this area, clarify where the wing ends and the tail begins, and really smooth everything out. The smoother and the tighter this looks, the easier it's going to be to work with in Illustrator. So let's pretend I've done all the work I need to do. And if I'm ready for Illustrator, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this first as a Photoshop file. And the reason for that is simple. If I need to make some adjustments to my levels or my paint layer or my original image or my crop or whatever, the Photoshop file is going to have most of that information. Okay, so you can always go back to that if you save it as a Photoshop file. The second thing I'm going to save is a JPEG. Sometimes JPEGs, when you import them into an Illustrator document, are a little easier to work with, a little less trouble on your processor. So let's just save this as a JPEG, click OK. And again, you have tons of options when you save as for Photoshop. There's a JPEG in the drop-down list for the format here. There's PNG. I mean, you can save it as anything Illustrator will read, and Illustrator will read Photoshop as well. It just depends on kind of how powerful your computer is, and the lab computers aren't too powerful. So once you've got that saved, you can switch over to Illustrator. Okay, so now we're ready to kind of put our image file in here and use Live Trace, which is by far one of my favorite tools. I use it all the time with Illustrator, especially with artwork that I make. I'll use Live Trace. So just kind of pretend you're not working with the duck, pretend you're working with a drawing you made or something you're really proud of, and you scanned it, cleaned it up in Photoshop, and now you're going to bring it into Illustrator and make it a vector. So I've got my new document here. To place an image in a Illustrator file, go File, Place, and I am going to use another file. This is my cleaned up version of the duck though, so Place. Alright. And as you can see, kind of grainy, but it's a little cleaner than it was before. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to click the Live Trace button. That is one of the options up here. What I prefer you kind of get in the habit of doing is drop down the tracing presets and option drop down menu and select the tracing options, preset on the bottom, which is gonna pop up all of the live trace options. Now in CS6, I don't think you have to do this. I think there's like a separate panel that pops up, and it's really handy. And so essentially in that panel, you're going to want to get to the advanced options. There's going to be headings like adjustments and trace settings, and then there'll be little black drop down arrows in that panel. Drop those arrows down so that you get all the options for these sections, so that you can have complete creative control over how your image becomes a vector. For now, I'm just going to show you kind of what you would do in that panel via CS5. A lot of the same options are there, not much has changed. There's a couple new things, but you can kind of teach yourself how to use the new things. First things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check mark the preview box. You'll have this option as well, and what the preview box will do is it'll show you what the current settings would do to your image. Now, essentially what just happened was the pixels in that image became vectors. So remember how you had to trace everything with the pen tool and then, you know, live paint it and all that? Now it's all just vectors for you automatically. So that saves you an awful lot of work. Now the reason I taught you how to trace everything in vectors was because that's ultimately where the real artistry lies and the real control lies. You can see here that even though we've cleaned up this image, it's not quite tracing it perfectly. So you're still going to have to do cleanup. And sometimes it'll trace horribly, in which case you're going to have to build it from scratch anyways. Back to live trace here. First things first, with the options here, I would recommend highly that you check mark the ignore white box. And again, if you're doing this in CS6 with the panel, drop down your advanced options and find that little box. The reason for this is now you're not going to have any white shapes. You're just going to have black shapes. You can always add white fills or colored fills to your object layer with live paint, so you don't need those shapes. Just keep the black. And then I'm going to mess with my other settings. So I can mess with threshold, see what that does. If I turn that up or down, okay, didn't do anything. I can turn up my blur here. That seems to be smoothing it out, rather nice. Okay, I can set the minimum area it will trace. That might help get rid of things. I can set my path fitting a lot tighter. Okay, it looks more like duck. Okay, whatever settings you're happy with, as soon as you're happy with them, you can click trace. Okay, and so long as this stays a live trace object, you can always go back to those options. The option button for CS5 is up here, the tracing options dialog. For you guys, it's going to be a separate panel that you can always open and go back to. But now what we're going to do, instead of messing with the tracing anymore, is we're just going to expand it and start to mess with the actual vectors. So this will be an option for you as well. If you don't see the expand option in your panel, or you lose track of it, any object you select, you can expand. So again, select your object, go to Object, Expand to expand it. For me, it's up here on the menu, so I'm just going to click that button. And now it's a vector object. Now I can actually mess with it. These are individual anchor points. They all have handles, and I can start to clean it up. So once you've traced your live or your scan and you've expanded it, you can actually start to clean up the vectors. And I would recommend you just use your direct selection tool and your pen tool. Okay, so go to your direct select tool and then go to your pen tool. And I just like to hold down control and kind of, you know, use my pen tool first to get rid of anchor points I don't need. Okay, you can click on a path to select it and make it active, so the pen tool will react with it, and then go to your let go of control to go to your pen tool and delete anchor points. And then, you know, toggle back to your direct select tool and pull out a handle and just start to slowly clean this up. Okay. Again, remember, the less anchor points you have, the better looking your object will look. Obviously, it'll be cleaner, and then the easier it will print and all that other stuff. So just kind of go through and clean things up. Again, if you don't remember the pen tool tips, again, hovering over an active path will give you the option to add an anchor point. Hovering over an anchor point will give you the option to subtract or get rid of one. Using control will toggle to your last selection tool, which you want to make your direct select tool so that you can pick up anchor points and move them around. And of course, Alt with the pen tool will toggle to your convert anchor point tool, which will allow you to pull new handles for your anchor. Okay, so if you're ready, you can start delving into your own duck and probably make it look better than mine. Try to clean everything up, make everything nice and crisp and shiny, and then hand it in, of course, with your name on it, because I'm going to have quite a few ducks that look an awful lot alike, and I need to know it's yours if I'm going to give you credit.